We.
My Mickey, my moon to me, just
Go with me, go with me.
On the pay, while on the pay, if I'm good, I better on the pay, better read down the better 55 grand for the brand, if I'm the bank, if you have with me, if you want to trade, everything got the better, we can come on, Cannalachia.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. It's season 2
I know.
already.
It's great to be back.
It's been flying by. We've been gone for like a month. Everybody at home doesn't know that.
It seems like a little longer. I've missed you.
I missed you. But we had Christmas, and then we had the I and Jeremy Bear Me, the time between Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah, where you don't know what day it is.
Nothing. Never happens.
Yeah.
and then Chill and I went to LA for New Year's. It was my brother-in-law's 60th birthday bash, which was just a madness party / concert with 37-song jam band of the craziest jam bands you've ever heard of.
The most overproduced cover band you'll ever see.
It was the most overproduced. We had 2 days of rehearsals for a birthday party. You ever been to
That's
a
a
birthday?
super awesome birthday party. I want you to throw a birthday party for me.
I didn't throw the birthday party. I just showed up. And then, we got the COVID on the way home, which was a bummer for about 2 weeks. Don't worry. We're good. I'm good. So we canceled last week because of that. I'm back. I'm fine. And now here we are.
Here we are.
And so excited. We have a really awesome guest today.
Yes, we sure do.
Elijah Rosenbaum.
Yeah.
So I'm from New York. I just said that yeah. And Elijah is here from the Bluegrass podcast.
Bluegrass Cannabis
Sorry.
podcast. Yes. Yeah. And also cannabis advocate. Spending quite a bit of time down in Frankfurt.
Up in the balcony.
Yeah.
Nice.
But it's we're happy to have you here and let you share a little bit of your story, as well as a little bit about your podcast and your history with cannabis and where you see things going and those sort of things. So it's really great to have you here.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. What else is going on? Well, should we just get into it?
Yeah, let's just get into it.
I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about with Elijah. So
I think so. Yeah.
Let's start with some. We have a new sound effect, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, what is it? I don't know about it.
I don't know what it is either. It's going to be a surprise.
For all of us?
Chill made it, so you don't have to hear me make weird RKO telegraph noises. So, what's going on? I feel like I'm on drugs. That sound makes me high. Good job, Chill. So
That was nice.
So cannabis news. Time for some cannabis news. So my tidbit, it's more of an ongoing debate. Because we've kind of talked about some of this before, and I want to get your take and what are your thoughts on all of it too, Elijah? So the HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services, has sent their recommendation to the DEA that marijuana, it's such a dirty word. I hate the term marijuana, but what else are we going to, right? Because we're not talking about cannabis in general. We're talking specifically about marijuana, which is a class 1 narcotic right now. The HHS is recommending the DEA move it to a Schedule 3 on the CSA, which would set it to be regulated the same way that pharmaceuticals are. Right? Which sounds good in private. Sounds like awesome. Okay, yay. It's no longer this massive federal felony if you get busted. But what that does is it changes the regulation to now marijuana products are going to be if they were to do this, are regulated the same way that pharmaceuticals are, which also means that dispensaries need pharmaceutical licenses. Anyone manufacturing or distributing marijuana products have to be licensed the way a pharmaceutical company is. And so it turns into this whole other sort of monster, I feel like. And it also paves way for pharmaceutical companies who already have those licenses to really take over the entire market, and that is terrifying.
Well, it is terrifying, and I think that for the general population that support cannabis or marijuana legislation, that's been a concern throughout history, is that that's where we're headed, is that we're concerned with that. We know that there have been, we have Marinol, and then Epidiolex, I guess, is that the only two cannabis pharmaceuticals that have actually been put out there as a pharmaceutical drug.
I think there are a few others,
just
but those are major ones.
I mean, I know there's a lot of synthetic cannabinoids that have been created for medicinal use, or at the pharmaceutical level. But it is kind of scary to think about that, because people have been fighting forever, and here we are at this point, and it is, like a lot of people say, the wild, wild west here in the U.S. when it comes to all of our cannabis and marijuana legislation here from state to state, and obviously fighting at the federal level. But that does create an issue, because you're states that have a deep history of having dispensaries out west, California, Colorado. I mean, they have kind of already set a tone and standard for an industry, and then all of a sudden this is just could upheave or just throw that all over the place. And it's really concerning. It's something to think about.
Yeah, a lot of the people who are arguing against this Schedule 3 classification, which a number of different reasons why, one being that it still doesn't, it's everything that these other states are doing, whether it's California, which we've had medical since 1996, and I say we, I'm a Californian originally, or New York or wherever. It doesn't, the regulation, so the state regulations are still against federal regulations, no matter how you slice it. So it still becomes a problem, because now all these dispensaries, they're not pharmacies, they're never, so it's, and also a lot of the people who are against this idea of Schedule 3 classification point out to the fact that the FDA doesn't currently, as far as pharmaceuticals go, have a department for plant-based medicines.
That's correct.
They'll have to completely revamp and create a whole new department, or only allow for synthetics.
That's true.
Fuck that.
Yeah, I'm not for that. I'll be honest with you, when it comes to plant medicine, that is something that I feel very highly about in my life, utilize a lot of it myself. And I don't think that that's something that I want the FDA to play a part in.
No.
I'll be honest with you. I mean, I don't know how deep I'll get into that discussion of three-letter agencies. But no, I don't know. This could be a mess. What's your thoughts on it, Elijah?
I mean, I think you all are pretty much nailing it on that front. I mean, I think, like you talked about, if it gets moved to Schedule 3, you're not really solving the problem. You're just kind of making it somebody else's or a new problem. I mean, are people still going to be criminalized if you have some cannabis, but you don't have a prescription, but...
It seems muddy. And, even when I look at current bills that are being filed here in Frankfurt at the state level, there's a lot of good work happening there. Mm-hmm. However, it's so intertwined, because we have like one bill that's toward driving intoxicated with hemp products. And then we have another one that's to set a standard for if you were to be pulled over under the influence of marijuana or meta, so it gets tricky, because then we've got, do we have recreational? Do we have medicinal? Now, is it classified? Did it come from a pharmacy? Is it now that you can grow it at home? I mean, it gets muddy. It's like, where does that go?
Yeah.
Decriminalization. Just cut the Gordian knot.
Right.
I agree. I think that it should be regulated. I mean, I've been preaching this since episode 1. That's fine. I get wanting to regulate it the way we do with the ATF, which is a very odd, the whole that 3-letter agency, like alcohol, tobacco, and guns. Okay, fine. I've never understood how those three things come together, but I'm sure somebody at some point had a meaning behind that. But let's let them regulate, and I get the FDA sort of being involved when it comes to edibles and things like that, and making sure people aren't just straight up putting poison into, our gummies.
Yeah, and I agree that, we need some basic regulations. And I don't want folks to think that when I'm talking about the FDA that way, that I don't think we should have some sort of standards. But there are a lot of questionable substances that are in our food system in America that you have to be like, how in the hell did that get through there?
Yeah.
And it's like, we're going to talk about we can't put this in food, but we can put that in food? Come on.
Again, no, it doesn't matter. I mean, I can get into that for days.
Yeah, and we're not going to do it. But
grown up in Europe and knowing like the differences on the fact that it can be done. If you look at a box of because Kraft does sell macaroni and cheese in Europe. Mm-hmm. If you look at the box and the ingredients there versus here, you can see the difference. So we know that these companies. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
Well,
Elijah, I have a habit of going off on random tangents.
It's okay.
No, but it's right.
Well, and I think one of the things I'd like to ask you is like from the standpoint of what we're seeing, at least at the state level or different things. I know that there are a lot of people who I believe that are leaders or legislators who care about this plant. And they are doing it for good reasons. But then I also sometimes wonder when I start to see things like, is this really just being used as a political type of, I don't know how to put that, like a political tug of war. And ultimately, when we look at that, it's like, we're messing with people's health and well-being here. And people are using cannabis. We know this. But like you say, when you talk about the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, there's a system already in place there. If we even looked at the state level here, if we, there's a system to go out to gas stations to check and see if people are selling cigarettes to underage. Well, that system's already into play here. So if we have adult use cannabis, we would just use that same system. Why reinvent the wheel there? It's just, I don't know. That just drives me nuts. Because what I'm saying is, my biggest concern is people who need it for medical reasons, and we'll get into some things that are happening here locally in a little bit, if that's okay with everyone. But when we think about that, if they're not able to get it, say at the dispensary, whatever, they're going to get it from the street. And my concern is it going to accidentally have got in, I don't know, in the way of fentanyl or something? We've got issues with drugs like that are really dangerous.
I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see a completely obsolete black market when it comes to anything. I mean,
no.
We still go out and buy moonshine.
Well,
and there's a liquor store in every corner.
There's black markets for so many things, but my concern is like, if I need it for a medical purpose and there's a specific strain that works for me, I want to be able to get that from someone I trust and that's knowledgeable. I don't necessarily want to think, oh, I've got to go through 14 different steps. This is untrustworthy, and there's the possibility that if I get that it could have went through multiple hands and got a trace of something that might kill me. That is a concern.
I mean, so we can look at all like California. It's been almost 30 years since we've had medical marijuana. I keep going back, 1996, I believe. But there is regulation. So I know a major thing. I don't know what company, and I'm not going to call out any particular company, but I know that there was a big deal. A bunch of vapes were recalled in California a couple of years back because it turned out that they were using a certain kind of pesticide in the plant, and some third-party lab tested the vape and went, hey, this is a problem. So we have those, there are regulations in place, whether it was, I believe it was actually a dispensary that had their third-party lab do the testing, and they were like, we're not going to sell this product to our customers.
Well, and I think that we also seen in the vape market, whether it was including cannabis or not, we had, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were using like vitamin E oils and sort of things that were getting in there. And once those combust, those are carcinogenic.
Yeah.
So there's been issues there. So yeah, we need some standards, but it just seems like it makes your head spin to look at the discussion at the legislative level and think, can we not simplify this? I mean, is it that we just can't sit at the same table? What is the deal?
But it makes you wonder how much the pharmaceutical lobbyists are involved in these, I want to know, but I read within the same article regarding the HHS recommendation, there was a small paragraph about how 29 former U.S. attorneys, it was very specific, 29 former U.S. attorneys wrote a letter to Biden urging him to make sure that nothing changes and that it stays a class 1 narcotic.
Yeah, because a lot of money is tied up in it, right? Like with the DEA, where part of their mandate is to go and to eliminate this.
Right.
If you're no longer required to do that, or it's not really an issue, all of a sudden you lose how much in funding and, associated assets that you get to seize along with anything you find.
Yep. And we're still, I think a big part of it, I said earlier, I hate the term marijuana. For those that don't know, marijuana was a term that was coined, in the 1930s, I believe, as part of the xenophobic scare of marijuana coming from Mexico. Like, again, we're still on this, fear Mexicans bullshit kick. That is just it's nonsense. So I think a big part of that too is somehow still playing, and because I don't know all the underbelly grossness of there's obviously reasons and there's people with money that are preventing the federal government from just declassifying and treating it the way they do alcohol.
It certainly makes you have to sit and think, who is it that doesn't want us to have this plant freely? Who is that?
Yeah.
And, like you said, the black market, that's never going to go away for anything. No. But to me, I've heard a few people say, there's an upcoming guest that I've heard her say that it was never like, there's this feeling that it was like the hemp people against the marijuana people. But it's never really been that. It's always been like them against us, whoever we want to say them is against us. But, we've talked about this goes back historically. I think this is another test to quote unquote, and you might title me, I don't know, a libertarian or something by saying this, but it's like a part of our freedom.
Yeah.
With this plant. It really is. The whole family of cannabis has so many blessings to offer us. And it's just like, why are we not utilizing this across the board? And we've got to get past this hurdle with, like you say, I don't like to think marijuana is the dirty word. I'd like to be able to utilize that word in a way so that we could freely say it and people not get that taking them back to jazz days or racism or to Mexico or all of these. I don't know how to really say it, but other than stigmas.
Yeah.
It's like how do we do it in a way where it's not? I say let's talk about the whole family of cannabis, but I want to be able to use the word marijuana and people not cringe, and I think that's happening. But I don't know. I think you make a good point there, reminding us about the money and what can be seized with that and that. And there's tons of other things that they could focus on that to me are also money makers for them, but they're also very dangerous for the population.
Well, I think like you're talking about freedom, it's kind of part of a wider conversation about like how do we interact with drugs in general, because there are other plant medicines, and if you do it with cannabis, all of a sudden we've opened up this conversation of, well, we kind of have to talk about all of these other things too now, because they're by extension in the same boat. We can argue about what the access should be, but not just with cannabis, but I think to a certain extent, opiates. Like things could not have gone more wrong on the opiate front. And that is the prime example of hyper-regulated, hyper-institutionalized. Like just because we do that doesn't mean it's going to work also. Like I think to play devil's advocate to the black market a little bit, or traditional market, or, regular farmers. There's a lot of regulated commerce that goes on in cannabis and in hemp that also doesn't inspire confidence that like, oh,
Right.
everybody's in this with the best of intentions.
Right.
Not just with like the vitamin E acetate, but
Well, and I like to think that the majority of what people do in the world tries to come from good intentions. But I think, well, you might disagree with me there. But what I like to look at from more of a positive attribute. I know that might sound really naive, but when I think about that, I think about, well, if we could work through a lot of the topics we're talking about, like the regulations and stuff, do you think that would play a role in changing some of those things that happen in that market? Do you feel like maybe those decisions that have to be made are almost forced on them because of regulations outside of that market even? Does that make sense?
in terms of cannabis or like drugs
Just
in general?
cannabis. Well, cannabis, really cannabis, but I mean, if you want to elaborate on other drugs.
I think with cannabis in particular, a lot of the times, a lot of businesses say, not, oh, woe is me, but like, we can't, but they're also not working to change it. And they're also utilizing it effectively enough to where I'm like, all right, you say that it shouldn't be that way, but you're also like skating with it. So you kind of have to pick a lane. Like, are you not like, what's a good example? I'm being really vague here. I think kind of the race to the bottom with flour is a good example. Like the fact that there are businesses that will run through a year expiration in licensed states and then sell to a different large business and then put another year expiration date on that. I'm like, okay, that's where I think the conversation of like, it's regulated, but you're doing like, I don't like it.
I see what you say. I see what you're saying there. Because it's really...
It reminds me of big tobacco. It's this like industry versus access thing. What are we here to do? What's the point of this?
Yeah. And I also, I'm in my, I'm not a full-on conspiracy theorist, but I am a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. I feel like, because you said big tobacco, but like, I can't help but think that somehow Monsanto is involved
Oh, for sure.
in not allowing cannabis to be because they have so much invested in fucking corn or whatever, whatever it is. There's, I don't know, soybeans, corn, whatever it is. We play a little, it's called Pit, and it's a stock market game, but you're trading like basic, coffee beans, soybeans, flour, and corn, essentially. And I feel like if you now we're going to throw hemp into this equation and the number of farms that are going to be wanting to grow hemp, and that's a problem for
Well,
Monsanto.
if you took Monsanto out of it, when you go and look at the agricultural maps and you look at carbon sequestration and the amount of corn that is grown in the middle of the United States, I think to myself, well, let's just add some hemp into that as well out there. Let's let's clean up the air and soil, but let's leave the M.
But
let's leave
also
them-
being that if we allow, so for instance in Ohio where they're allowing up to they were supposed to allow up to 6 plants.
I don't think that it's got changed yet. I think it went ahead and went in. Didn't it go in because they weren't able to?
I don't know, because there's the weird thing where they're in session, but they've also just gotten this mandate. So it's like,
That's where I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
real certain what's happened. Like, is it just in limbo? Like,
I think they're fighting. Isn't like
Yeah,
the
so they're
Democratic
fi-
support is in committee. He's like going forward, but also the Republicans are trying to move a bill that'll change
Yeah.
it.
So technically, as of December 8th, Ohioans can grow up to 6 plants for a family of 4. Very specific and hilarious. But yeah, they're fighting against that. But like, is that also something, because this is a crop that you can pretty easily grow indoors, outdoors, on your own. It may not be the crazy best super weed that you can get, out in California from some, from Death Mountain.
well, I'd like to argue that there are some people out there that might not want the super weed. They might
Right.
want a different weed.
Yeah.
And that's, you had a guest on your show not that long ago that it didn't even occur to me that I was like, yeah, why can't I do that? Where he was talking about just basically farm to consumer,
Yeah.
why can't I just go to a farm, buy
and-
the little hemp stand, little marijuana stands on the side of the road.
And I think maybe we've talked about that once before because I'm a big fan of the farmers market.
Yeah.
And so I think how great, there are vineyards,
Yeah.
there are folks growing grapes and other fruits and making wine. And I'm 21 and older. I can be at the farmer's market and buy a bottle of wine to go with my edible, my culinary mushrooms and other things there. So it's like, so why shouldn't I be able to go to the farmer who has an additional crop that's extra revenues for their farm and be like, I need a little garlic breath.
Yeah.
To go to the side of, I'm gonna make some linguine tonight with these mushrooms and that bottle of wine. And, while I'm doing that, I might want a little garlic breath.
Even California is not there, because the day that I see a sign that says strawberries, eggs, avocados, weed, I'll be like, yes.
It's an all-in-one stop,
But we have those all over the place.
But
Great.
Minus
the weed.
That would be great to me. I mean, I think we should still have some sort of standards, and I've mentioned this to a couple labs. How great it would be that, say, the small farmer has a certain rate that they get to be able to do their testing in a lab, so that they can present to people and say, this doesn't have pesticides in it. I grew it organically. Those sort of things, and that's, to me, it's not only sharing a little bit of wealth at the financial level in our communities, but it is also in agriculture and in our health and wellness.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's that big of an idea. It's not just it is an idea, but to me, it's like, the more we have this conversation, I do believe that we could manifest that.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the solution that has to happen if it's going to be functional at some level for people below a certain scale. Just because looking at small farmers in other states, I don't think there's really been a super successful. I mean, Michigan, I would say, has done it better than other states in terms of having smaller producers. Missouri, maybe Oklahoma, even though they're only medical. I mean, people talk about Oklahoma not legalizing recreational, but I mean, a lot of people are pretty happy with the ease of the medical market, and how you can operate. Not saying it's all the best, but I mean, kind of like we're talking about small farmers, it makes too much sense. And kind of like talking about the safety of it, I can go and check with Jim Bob down the road that I see his farm. It's a pretty good read on oh, okay, there's a thing of Miracle Grow or whatever. Maybe I'm not going to buy from him.
Right.
Maybe I've bought other stuff from him or her before, whatever it happens to be. But it also kind of like you're talking about financially makes it financially viable. If you're selling an eighth as a cultivator on the market and you're getting $3 for the $40 product, it's that's unsustainable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a $400 pound when you of finished product, and you're going to have to pay the processor, you're going to have to pay a dispensary to sell it, and I like that channel. I think it should be open to small farmers, but it does provide blocks too, to where it's I actually can explain really well what my product is, where it came from, how it's best to be utilized. Yes, direct to consumer is what I want.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense.
And I think really what I'm seeing in a lot of discussions and conversations I'm having with people when I'm out is direct to consumer about many goods, not
Yes.
just our cannabis. I mean, I'm now purchasing my eggs from a local farm. If I don't have chickens in my backyard, I hope to have them sometime soon, then I'm going to get them from a local farmer. Some of my meat's coming from local farmers. I think it's really where we need to head to. We need to step back in history a little bit here in this country. I think for our health, our well-being, supporting our communities and building them back up from within.
The climate.
Yeah, well, yeah.
A bigger part of climate change isn't necessarily veganism versus omnivore. It's the location of the food that you're getting.
yeah.
Quinoa actually became this huge great thing, but I know I'm ranting again, I'm diverging, but quinoa became a big for vegetarians, for vegans, but it simultaneously divulged a massive food source from Asian and Eastern countries that was their main grain. The way the way, sorry, the heat is on, the way that corn or wheat, and so it became a big problem, and so that's why we need to focus, think globally, act locally.
I agree.
Yeah.
And we don't even think about in this country how some of the things like avocados, tomatoes, things they get trucked across the United States. We don't think about that. We don't. That's not something that when we think about sustainability that comes first to our minds. I mean, now that there's more discussion about it, it's there. But I think, across the board, I think that we could get there. And I think that might lead us into, I know one of the things that we've discussed and one of the things that you talk about a lot is the ability for people to even have a home grow.
Yeah.
So.
No, 100%. Again, access. Just let people work with it because it actually cuts through all of these other steps. Like, I don't think anyone is really intentionally growing cannabis plants like, I'm really going to mess up this process and hurt myself. I'm like, it's really easy to look at a plant and just be like, nah, just no.
But also, homegrown is not going to say. So I grow my own tomatoes, but I don't grow every variety of tomato. So when I want aroma or an heirloom for a certain dish or recipe, I go to the farmer's market.
Yeah. There will still be a market. People, just because there are farmers markets doesn't mean they're packed every day and you can't get produce there.
Yeah.
That's not the problem.
And I would like to revert back just a second to our brothers and sisters on the West Coast and in the mountains of Colorado when I said some people don't want super weed. What I mean by that conversation is there are folks that I talk to here that are maybe a generation or two older than me that say, I would really like to be able to get some of the weed that we used to have back in the day, and jokingly say a seed here or there or the stuff that was growing in the middle of the cornfield, that sort of thing. Because at the levels of THC and that the trichome levels of indoor grows and things have changed over the years, that can be for some people that haven't consumed cannabis in a while, that can be something new for them,
But also, I'm one of those people, I'm
one of those people too. I mean,
the purple haze I got in high school that was grown in a field in Vermont somewhere is not the same purple haze that they sell at the dispensary, in LA anymore. It's just not the same product. I want, I've always know your dosage. I'd like something very mild.
Well, and I think that also, when we were talking earlier about the pharmaceutical industry is, could we not sit at the same table and have some sort of agreement to where, if they want to extract and create a specific percentage level at the pharmaceutical level and that be like a system, a market, and then we have this market that may be for the medical market, like a scale or something, and then we have this area over here that's like or maybe just those two categories. Maybe it's just like we have the pharmaceutical grade, let them do that, let them do their thing with that, and then over here we have this,
I mean, well, that's kind of how things are already treated in California. So when you go to a dispensary and you're an FTP, a first-time patient, as they call them, the first question they ask you is, what's your dosage? So, and not a lot, most people are like, well, I don't even know what that means. And then they get into the conversation of basically how high do you want to be? And what are you looking to do? When I go in, for instance, my mom had surgery and I was trying to, wean her off the crazy opiates the doctor had prescribed and get her onto some marijuanas. But then, so I was like, this is what I'm looking for my mom, she just had spine surgery. So help me out big time here with this pain versus I'm the one taking care of her. She's giving me anxiety, but I still have to keep my wits. So she's up here and I'm here. And the dispensaries in LA are really great about going, yes, you want a sativa and blah, blah, blah. And she needs an indica and, So
and then looking at terpene levels and those sort of things. So earlier you were saying something about how that opens up a whole concern about other plants. And as people start to educate themselves on terpenes and those sort of things, and you expand that out into other plants, and you really look at that. And today's herbalists and people who are studying themselves to treat themselves with plant therapies, it's something to think about because it's like, well, this is a hurdle we have to look at here, because if we set the standard with this plant, what happens to the rest of them? You know, are all of a sudden I'm not going to be able to grow these 5 herbs in my garden? You know, I mean, that's the thing, we joke about it. We talk about it in our house. We're like, this is an herb. This is an herb. So let's treat it that way.
Yeah.
You know?
So we've spent 30 minutes talking about cannabis news. We haven't even gotten to our guest Elijah.
That's right. So let's do that.
So let's do shifting focus to Elijah. So talking about, some of us don't want the super weed that you can get at the dispensaries today. We want old school. What it sounds terrible to say, but what we had in our childhood. So speaking of childhood,
our younger years.
How were you? What was your introduction to cannabis?
So I kind of grew up around cannabis, of course, in Kentucky, and like you bump into things, but in terms of like using for the first time, am I too far away?
No.
Cool. I just wanted to check in for a moment.
If you can, if you feel like it, you can pull your mic towards you.
I'm worried I'll almost have it at like the full extension. But God. Oh, going to school. Yeah, I went to college in New York, and I was the nerdiest, most weird. I saw some people going into a room, and I knew a guy there, and I was like, hey, is that like, and he was like, weed? And I was like, yeah. He was like, do you want come with me? And he took me back, and like I tried weed for the first time, and pretty soon after that, I was like, this is what I want alcohol to be.
Right.
Like, this is what I was hoping for. And pretty soon after that, it was just like, so how do I get it myself? And then it just...
So you said this was college. So you're a little bit of a late bloomer. College? Yeah.
I didn't smoke, drink, cannabis, tobacco, alcohol, anything until I was like almost 19.
Oh.
My whole thought process was like, I'm never going to do anything. I'm going to be like 100% clean, like forever. And then that just...
Were you one of those straight edge kids? Did you have like an X on your hand in high school?
No, not like that. More like I was just such a nerd. I was like speech and
Nice.
debate and theater. And I was like, no. And also like, you have different family histories of things where you're just like aware growing up that there are problems and things. And you're like, oh, I don't want that. Let me navigate this differently. And then, that just fell off. I fell off hard. I was like, oh.
Now I have it every day.
Pretty much. That was, I think, the crazy thing. I studied in the Middle East, and that was really what got me to like finding out about hash. Like, that was really what took me to where I was like, oh, okay. I see. At first I was like, oh, I'm getting high. And then I was like, oh, I'm having an experience. Like,
Right?
Yeah.
Was it Lebanese by any chance? The hash?
the thing is, it's always so muddy, the origin of what you're
Fair
going to
enough.
get, especially like I tried it in Egypt and in Israel and like
Right.
in Lebanon. And so it's like, or not in Lebanon, sorry, in Jordan. That would have been a crazy experience. But no, you tried in different places
Yeah.
and people are like, it's from here. And I'm like,
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I have a personal experience with what I was told was Lebanese hash in Germany, and yeah, I went to the uncomfortable planet, is what I call it.
well, they mix it with tobacco too. And
Yeah.
that's always just such a different experience.
Well, I'm a cigarette smoker and was then, but no, it was a whole new planets. That's the story I've told, where I was hiding from my dad on the tour bus in my bunk. Like, nobody can know that I'm high. Speaking of which, so do you have an experience that was like, now you know your dosage because
Not really by myself. It's always with another person, and so I don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Fair enough.
But it's like, I feel like when I'm by myself, I'm pretty okay with like, I never go out and socialize and do stuff for the most part. So I'm always well within my tolerance, I feel like.
Gotcha.
But it's like, yeah, as soon as you add another person, all of a sudden it's like a mirror. You can kind of see what's going on, and you're like, oh, they look like that, so I must be like this.
Right.
No.
Well, the children know I'm high.
Yeah.
Terrifying. So now, as an adult. Do you still use cannabis recreationally, or are you more medical, or where are you at with it?
I mean, I think both, right? It's kind of this idea of like, kind of like where they call it adult use. I'm like, I don't care how you're using it. I'm an adult.
Right.
I'm using it. Like, so like I'll use topicals a lot of times, especially on the farm. Like I'll do my hands really hard and then put gloves on, and it changes it. So I don't know if that's quite medical in the sense that I have been prescribed, but I definitely use it when I need it.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd say icy hot is technically like a medical, it's just because it's over the counter. You know what I mean? Like,
I like the term therapeutic too.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and when we're talking about that, a lot of times when I'm talking with friends, it's almost like all use of cannabis at some point is medicinal. I mean, I just don't. If it was in relation to alcohol, I've never thought to myself, I think I need alcohol to fix this issue, this medical issue of mine. I have this condition. I think alcohol will fix that for me.
So we've just learned you're not an alcoholic.
Well, listen, I like some wine, and I'll sit down and have a glass of bourbon with you. I'm currently abstaining for a while, not just dry January, but and I've lost a couple pant sizes, so I'm real happy about that. But no, it's just one of those things, because we do bring up that topic is, are you using it recreationally or medicinally? And I think at some point, everyone who uses cannabis, at some point, it's pretty much therapeutic. So, but I get where we kind of define that as well. But I think at the personal level, I just think if I'm using it, when I'm using it, I am using it therapeutically.
I think that there are definitely. So I am now, I think we've talked about, like, I'm pretty strictly only medicinal, quote unquote, if you will. No longer for anxiety issues or anything, but I have, I have lady troubles. So once a month, I'll go through, a can of edibles, or I also have issues with insomnia. But I've learned in the past 2 years, because every time I've tried to just like, I'm going to eat some edibles and go to an escape room, it is a terrible decision. It is not fun.
Well, I will tell you that, so I had not been smoking for a long time, because it had got to the point where, I hadn't smoked in a long time, and then I started dealing with some things like, it was not really helping the anxiety, or I just didn't have the right strain. And we were in Florida, and I actually tried garlic breath. And became a big fan of it. I tend to lean more on an indica side, and it worked really well for me. It was very calming. It helped with any type of anxiety I was feeling. I did not feel paranoid. It did not knock me completely out. I was like, this strain I think is for me, And so for anyone listening that deals with those things, you might want to check that out if you're in a place where you can find it.
Check it out.
But that's one of the things that, and it was pretty tasty too. I'm not going to lie. It had a nice profile to it. But I tend to, like we've talked before, use things like edibles or oils or tinctures, microdose cannabis. I use it topically. Obviously, we have a company that makes some topical products. And but that kind of just went, wee. And it was because you were talking about, like, the children don't.
Yeah, no,
Don't.
It's famous. We went to Vegas to get married. I went to Area 51 to try and go to Mart, whatever it's called, something Mart. It's an interactive art exhibit thing. It's super fun. I've been meow woof. There we go. No, I said Area 51. I can't remember what the Mart is called, but it's the Meow Wolf Mart. So I don't know. I took like 30, 40 milligrams of whatever edible I got from the dispensary, because I can't really smoke anymore, and that's a whole other issue. I cough and then I pee a little bit. I'm on a podcast. I'm just gonna share my issues so that other women can relate to me. It's okay. So I ate about 40 milligrams. Went thinking it was like an adult playground, but we were there during the day, so it was very much a family playground, and it's a whole thing. And yeah, by like maybe 40 minutes into it, I looked at Chill, my husband, and I was like, we gotta go. There's too many kids here. The children know I'm high, and I can't be around them because they're judging me. And And that's what my brain does. So,
See, that's why I smoke. I can put it down. There's no commitment beyond I'm there.
Right. So I think that's myth. So like anywhere from 10 to 20 milligrams, I just go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Anything more than that, I'm good with at home. Like, or we could go to the movies. I'll take 30 and go to the movies and be like, ooh, this is fun. But yeah, being out in public with too many not adults is a problem. Or when you're at an escape room and you're trying to figure out what channel the Lone Ranger is on at what time so you can unlock the lockbox. It's very difficult.
See, I can just picture that whole scenario. That's all.
Yeah, no, the whole escape room thing divulged so badly because I knew that I was answering the puzzle wrong, and I just kept answering it wrong over and over again while staring at the puzzle and knowing what the answer, till finally our friend who was in town visiting us just let out this enormous sigh and collapsed against the wall, to the point where the host that's like watching on the video cameras just hit her mic and started laughing at us.
Because that's what you want.
Because it's literally, she's like, I'm laughing so hard at you, you have to hear it. So that happened, and I kept going, no, it's channel 4 at 9:00. It's the Lone Ranger. No. Anyway, yep. So now, I eat and I stay in bed. It's great.
Well,
I enjoy it.
I'm just totally picturing that. I'll be honest with you, you're tempting me, even though that I could think about the anxiety I would have in that escape room, but you're tempting to me to say, let's go do that.
We can. I mean, it wasn't anxiety. It was just my brain. It was like what I was reading, I could not verbalize. Like my brain was dissecting itself and just kept saying the wrong thing. That's all I don't know. The mouth was not braining. The brain was braining, but the mouth was not braining.
So on the topic of asking Elijah about using it recreationally or medicinally, if we can. So would you say, like you're saying adult use, we sometimes ask, and if there's not one or you're not comfortable talking with that, that's fine. But is there any type of conditions that you might deal with or someone do, and they utilize cannabis for that?
I would say for me, kind of like working on the farm, like general aches and pains in terms of like a topical way, like that's probably the most medical. I mean, also to eat, I generally am like a pretty light person. So the fact that I can smoke and then be like, oh, I can put down some food, that's like immensely helpful.
Nice. Yeah. Well, and we just learned science just taught us why that happens. Very exciting news in the science community, by the way. They'd found out from mice that THC does, in fact, stimulate the part of the hypothalamus that regulates our hunger.
And that's really important for a lot of conditions.
Yes.
And let's continue on with some of our other questions, because that leads me into wanting to talk to you about something else, but I don't think we're there just yet. And I don't want to get off topic there. So I know we have kind of a list of questions that we do like to ask everyone. And
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
So you talked about like topical, but like, are you like smoker, edible, little bit of everything?
Yeah, mostly smoker, but like I don't do dabs, I don't do vapes. I'm like traditional hash, flower is kind of where I keep it. Maybe
Nice.
I'll smoke a spliff. Like if I'm really feeling that I need something heavier, I guess I would say. Yeah, I'm not a dab person. It really kills me that I'm not sometimes. Like I feel like it's just a missed. I don't know. Every time that I dab, I'm like, wow, this just kind of tasted like vapor and vaguely like lemonade. I'm like, I don't get the nuance to it. A lot of people are like, it's like this or like that. And I'm like, I get the temperature changes. I get all of it, but it's never been my.
Yeah, I tend to have issue with the way dabs are created now. So, like I've heard the old school way was to basically freeze, like to run through a tube and freeze it. And it was all somewhat natural, right? Like a little bit. But then friends in California who were manufacturing them talked to me about some of their methodology, and they were using some form of chemical, like a gas. I can't remember what it was.
Butane?
Butane.
Butane.
Yeah,
And I was
BHO
like-
is different.
I was like, that's fucking horrifying. Like they were literally like, we make hippie crack. This is what it is. And I was like, yeah, and it fucking tastes like it too. Like,
Yeah, and it's worse. BHO, like all of the solvents, I'm really not a super huge fan of. Like with the dabs, I'm like, if I am going to, it's going to be solvent free. It's going to be kind of like you're talking about, like fresh frozen, wash it, press it. That's as much as I want you to do with it. Beyond that, it's going to irritate me, probably, whatever it is that you're doing.
yeah. Yeah. It did not entice me to like try their samples of their product. I was
Right.
like,
And as
"Oh,
a person
good."
who's continually looking at things like unpasteurized eggs, and I'm curious about getting the milk from a local dairy person and all the things that are very questionable. And, you have to really think about what's happening with your cannabis as well.
Yeah.
And how is that being processed. And, but maybe I'm uncool. Maybe I'm one of the uncool kids now. But when I think about cannabis, if I was gonna smoke it, I just want the flower. I want the old school original way to do it. I want to smell the terpenes. I want to taste them. I want the experience with it. And I know that some other people argue me about that, but that's just me. That's just where I'm at. Maybe I'm just not one of the cool kids now, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I like edibles, but I like the idea of cooking with it and finding those right kinds of earthy flavors. So I had my own like cooking show for a minute on YouTube during the pandemic, and so and then I had a birthday dinner with just a handful of friends where we made each course. I think it was 5 or 6 courses. Each course you could have medicated or not, but finding those pairings of like, one of my favorites that I discovered in that was a medicated chimichurri, because you have really nice balance of like the earthiness of the hemp, or, the terpenes that are coming through.
Well, and you've got correct me if is it parsley? You got the parsley, so you've got those clean,
it's very
really kinda
green, very bright.
Goes well with maybe some pine,
Yeah.
pinene, limonene. Those flavors go really well together. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
I love
now
that
I'm
part of
hungry.
it.
Now I'm hungry.
Right? That's so good.
My boss Sunshine used to take just fresh leaves, like at a certain point in the year, and she would do like a freshly juiced like chai
Tea.
smoothie.
Nice.
It was so good. Anything chai, I'm like, is always incredible. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's spices and it's cannabis, and it's like, all right, this meshes pretty.
And that's another topic that has came up, I know, throughout the time of the hemp industry and those sort of things, in which I know it becomes a viable plant. But to think about like sprouts, to be able to eat from microgreens of cannabis, and for smoothies and
Yeah.
those sort of, it to me is just like we're missing out on so much abundance.
So, the one that I think I've talked about it before, it was a honey I used to be able to get in California that was made by bees that were pollinating the marijuana plants. So the honey was somehow, I can't use the word organic because technically no honey can ever be organic. It's a whole thing. Because you don't know where the bees
Right.
are actually. Some of the bees could be going
Unless you're
elsewhere.
tracking them.
Yeah. Tiny little trackers on all my bees. But yeah, so it was, and I don't understand this because it didn't make sense to me, but I guess the bees were medicating the honey via propagating the marijuana plants, and it was the best honey in the world. And that honey with some chai tea was like, it was my superhero.
We're gonna have to start doing this in a way where we can eat just right afterward, because we're
But I keep thinking about having because I didn't get it this time in California, because we went our first night and we spent like $350 and we didn't go back to the dispensary after that because we lost our minds. I didn't get my positivity or my honey, because that would be my idea. If I could just have my little honey and my tea, and then by the end of the show, I'm just taking a nap in the car. It's great. I'm not. So one of the things we've talked about on the show when we originally conceived the show was to just have like a big plate of cookies or brownies on the table for everybody to partake during the course of the show. We don't have the budget for that right now, to be honest. Like eventually, hopefully.
So everyone like, follow, and share so that we can work on having a thing of cookies here. And we'll share.
Eventually, we're gonna have some merch. You have some really nice merch.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was digging it. I was like, we should have merch too.
Yeah.
But yeah, but we don't have anything right now. Just listen for free and like us.
Yeah.
It's a great idea until you have to put it somewhere.
Right?
That's true.
Fair enough. Oh, so you're not like you actually like purchased all that merch?
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we'll take some lessons from you on that. We'll you can kind of be our advisor on how we should do that.
Right.
Or what you've learned along the way.
Small batch sizes at first.
Fair enough.
Gotcha. Well, I know some of the other questions that we ask, and I think we know the answer to this. This will probably be a simple one. Do you feel that cannabis should be legalized medically, recreationally, and not just at like the state level, but also federally? That's a question we ask everyone, and I think we know the answer, but let's hear you say it.
If you couldn't guess it, the answer is like, yes, just decriminal. Like, stop it. Stop the nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, there's more important things. Like, this is really the thing we're getting tied up on. Like, it's kind of like with the legislators talking to people. I get why people get frustrated sometimes. I'm like, really? We all got to get together and we got to do this. We need to make this an issue. No, I'm for just remove it. It solves more problems. Like, it just practically makes a lot of sense. I'm like, from every standpoint.
Well, not to mention there are other topics that need to be addressed outside of this, that this takes time away from, and people are already utilizing it. And the people have spoken in other states, the majorities, and we have been out and about across towns over the past few years. We've had a lot of people talk to us, and from what we have seen, I agree that probably 90% of Kentuckians are like, just legalize it.
Yeah.
Just and someone will say legalize it and utilize some tax dollars for things we need. Yeah. I know the city of Lexington could use some street repairs because I don't know if they're in cahoots with the tire companies or not, but I grew up at the foothills of Appalachia, and there are some places, like you've heard us talk about a place called Pea Sticks and places. When I'm driving around the city of Lexington, sometimes I'm like, hold up, I think I'm in Pea Sticks. I'm out in the country, you know? I'm like, what's going on? Well, we could utilize some of those tax dollars when we've talked about it before, but there are so many other things we could be addressing if we could just get past this, you know? And it's
Education,
just,
Veterans Affairs.
Yes.
Even our police departments.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that they need.
right.
So, I mean, there's so many things. That
Well, it's like tied up in that conversation, right? Like with the police departments, with all of these other issues. It's so strange that there are so many different interested parties when it feels like it really should just be like a community issue, maybe.
Right.
Like people are incentivized to act a certain way with it, and that's where it goes off the rails, right?
Yeah.
That's why Ohio had their public ballot measure. I'm not sure what that do you all know the technical what it is they did by voting that in?
It was a
Like
legislation
a ballot measure?
bill, right? What do they call? Every state has like a different. Essentially, it was a ballot measure, but
but there, like in Kentucky, for us to do that, I think we have to actually amend
the
Yeah, we can't
Constitution.
do that now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So we'd have to amend that. And
Or I think it is you can, but you need 2/3 in both
Yes,
houses,
yes,
which is like, you already did it. That makes no sense.
Exactly. Just a sigh.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
In a way, with all of the, again coming from. So I was born in New York. Hence the Rosenbaum. But my family moved to Los Angeles when I was 16. So that's when I became legal voting age at 16. And a year after cannabis became legalized. But I miss the way that just in general that voting worked, at least within Los Angeles County. I've talked about this before where every bill and every ballot measure, sometimes you'll have 20, for everything from, you're in your own little community within the LA County. But we would get these books basically before every, voting time that had what the bill was, explained it like in its full legalese. And then you would have a proponent or someone that was for it and someone was against it, but it wasn't the person that wrote the bill. So it would be like a school teacher and a pharmacist. How they chose the people that wrote the pros and cons, I don't know exactly, but it was so you could be really well informed on all of the positives, the negatives, exactly what was in the bill. They were abridged versions, but still, all of the main specifics that you needed to know. And that was on whether it came to spending or law changes, whatever it was. And I miss that. I miss the level of voter education we had. And
Transparency.
And I wish, my first, time in Kentucky when votes, I was like, wait, I didn't get my book yet. And everyone's like, what fucking book? What are you talking about? There's no book, lady. And I was like, that's a bummer. We should have that. And it's nonpartisan and it's, and all the candidates as well. So, and then the same thing, pros and cons for candidates and where they stood on major issues. I go to Ballotpedia now. Living in Kentucky was the only place that I can get any information. But then, a lot of times candidates don't buy. So you'll find candidates that will fill out their Ballotpedia information, but you'll have, if there's 5 candidates, maybe 2 of them have.
Yeah, and it's just they ran on this date, they filed on this date, and that's all the information about who they are.
No, so when you sometimes, but like, like Charles Booker, for instance, when you go to his Ballotpedia page, so there's questions that Ballotpedia, like where do you stand on?
Yeah, they can fill them out.
And sometimes they do, and I'm very thankful. So politicians, if you're listening, and voters, if you're listening, I think if we start at least utilizing Ballotpedia more and politicians utilize it, it's a fantastic resource.
And can I add to that
for education,
just in case politicians are listening, and let's stay on topic with your mission. Let's talk about what you're going to do. Let's talk. I don't want to hear about your opponent. I don't want you being nasty. I don't care what side you're on. I want to hear about how we're going to move forward, how we're going to make life better for everyone. I don't want to hear about a mistake your opponent made 20 years ago. I just don't. Don't waste my time.
What's the plan?
Yeah, what's the plan? How do we move forward together?
Right.
Yeah.
What are you going to do to better this state, this county, this city?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
District.
When I go to vote for you, I want to know exactly what you stand for. I want to know how are we going to move forward together. And that's not partisan. I look at all the candidates. I want to know. We want to know.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I had to add that.
No, because I'm a pretty staunch Democrat, but maybe there are Republicans out there that do have good and valid points of, things that I agree with that I don't even know, because instead you've spent a bunch of time talking about how bad Joe Biden is when you're running for, a city district. And
and I think that's one of the issues, and we won't get into that deeply because we could spend a whole nother hour on it, but I think that's one of the issues that we have when it comes to, leaders and leadership and campaigns is people get lost in all of that, and they don't know, and they don't. Maybe you might want to support someone of a different party, but you don't even know what they're about because we're listening to all the drama, or we're hearing all the drama. I'm not getting into it. I kind of like turn that off, and then if I turn it off, I don't know anything about you. And so let's just not do that. Let's try to stay positive, people. So
I agree.
And kind of like your vote matters. Like it matters that you show up. Like not showing up, like not advocating against something is not the same as like not showing up and kind of like you're saying, have a plan. Like don't act like disassociating from the process sort of buys you some sort of moral leverage of like, well, I'm not the problem. And I'm like, well, you're not the solution. And that's really what I need.
Absolutely.
Kind of like you're saying, I don't care. I need you to show up so that we can do this thing.
I mean, I think in that regard, it if you believe that you not, I know we've divulged into like voter stuff, but if you believe that your voice doesn't have an impact or your voice doesn't matter, I think that's coming from a place of privilege.
Mhm.
I think that's coming from a place of you have never actually had your freedoms questioned by legislation outside of cannabis. You know, I'm in an I can get into abortion and all that, but I won't. But I'm going to go into one big one that I think a lot of people can go, oh fuck. So I'm obviously in an interracial marriage, and in the past couple of years, there has been talk of having the Supreme Court overturn Loving versus Virginia, which is what constitutionally allowed interracial marriage to become legalized in the United States, and that was in 1957. Loving v. Virginia. Anyway, we'll come back. But you know, so these are the things that when I look at. Obviously, that's not on the tip of everyone's mind. But I look at that and go, "Holy shit! I have to make sure that whoever I vote for isn't trying to, overturn Loving versus Virginia or." Anything that's going to impact my life personally. I think that there's a lot of people out there who just they because they don't have that fear of this could completely change my life, whether it's gay marriage or abortion or interracial marriage. So it's a privilege to be able to say, well, I'm not going to vote because it doesn't matter.
And I think it's extremely important that you say that because, like I've said, and I say to my friends, I think the best way to love your neighbor is to you got to try to understand where they're coming from. And, you sharing that story for someone out there, they may, like you say, that may not be on the tip of of mine, but it's something we should think about because to me, I hear that and I think, well, what an audacity. I mean, why would we even think about that?
Yeah.
Like that to me is just, I don't believe we should be legislating like what people do with their body, man, woman, whatever. That is up to that person. That's their journey with their medical professionals. Stay out of it.
And that's how we tie back into cannabis.
Exactly, But it is, it's important to think about those things when you're looking at who you're voting for. Because if you're not well informed, maybe you're not pushing the right button.
The kind of weed I smoke should be between me and my dispensary and my farmer.
There you go.
So on a lighter note.
So what is like one of your greatest inspirations?
As a farmer, as a podcast host.
Whatever that might be for you.
As a human.
Probably like my mentor Sunshine. I loved growing with her. So I apprenticed with her for a couple of years and just got to grow with her. And I mean, I feel like that's one of my big inspirations for like how I want to go about like growing weed like her, like being a part of my community like her. Like,
nice.
What are some other? I feel like I'm really bad at questions like these because I'm like, if you ask me at any other time, I could give you a lot. I feel like I find a lot of inspiration in like just getting out and about, not necessarily through cannabis, but like being on the farm, like just getting a time of working on something and being around plants and being around soil to where it's like, it kind of feels like you recharge.
Nice.
Like that's not like epiphany inspiration exactly, but like I definitely walk away feeling more energized in a lot of ways. Like I might be physically tired, but I don't feel drained.
Right.
I don't feel upset for the most part. I might feel slightly frustrated depending on what's happened that day, but like in a good way. Like every day I go in, I want to be there. So I mean, just farming, I would say, being around soil, like getting to do these things.
Well, and we know scientifically it's been proven that the biome in the soil actually helps to fight things like depression and helps us to feel better. And I kind of join you there. One of the things I miss, we're currently recording in January in the middle of an Arctic freeze. So there's not a whole lot of gardening going on, but that's what I miss the most is being with my plants, being in the soil and working with them. And there's just something that is I don't know. I don't know if it's inspiring, but it's certainly uplifting. So I can share that with you. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Thanks for sharing that with us.
It gives you something to hope for on the other end of winter.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it makes me be like, oh, that's right. Like life is going to happen again. It doesn't feel like a frozen rock.
Right.
I'll say winter hits me hard though, like you were talking about in colder places. Illinois and New York, I'm like, I'm glad I'm done with the more intense winters. I'm like, it's January to March. It's fine. Like,
That's true. It's true. My birthday is this weekend. I was born in a blizzard. It seems like every year for the past couple of years, we've had a blizzard or like a snarly Arctic front. My birthday is going to be 4 degrees. Chill asked me what I wanted for my birthday. I said, I want to go to the Caribbean. He was like, cool. That's not so what else can we do? That's not happening. I'm over. So yeah. Anyway, I'm over the cold in general. I'm done with it. But then I was like, let's move to Atlanta. But then I just saw that, which is not Georgia, I know, but Memphis. It was officially like they had a massive blizzard in Memphis this week.
Yeah, it's pretty cold. It's went down. It's hit Texas, and I think in the Panhandle of Florida, it was in the 20s today. So
And just to remind climate change deniers, the melting of the ice caps and of the glaciers, which causes a unbalance in the polar circle, is what causes an unbalance of Arctic type weather.
Well, I know we're currently recording this episode in January, and I woke up this morning and we had about 4 to 5 hours of like no electricity. Shared that with you when you came in, Elisha. And, I was brushing my teeth in the dark as it was getting cold, and I reminded myself that was a first world problem.
True.
But when, I won't lie though, when the cold started to touch the bones, I was like, okay, I got to go somewhere. So I went somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that I had a place to go. So
Yeah.
But it was a first world problem.
But are there third world kind of are there any third world
okay, so
countries
maybe
in
that
the
one-
no are there any third world countries in the Arctic? Like I don't think that's
Well, there's probably not. I guess I'm just referring to the fact that
no, again,
I'm grateful it's going to come back on in a few hours, and
I'm
that I
just
can brush my teeth.
checking my brain.
But
to
okay,
figure
so
out.
that wasn't a great. That
No,
wasn't a way
the
to go about it.
electricity part, but
Yeah.
the cold part.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, okay, but with things changing, there could
This is
be.
what I want called. This is when I want us to be live and have callers, so that people can call and check my privilege and be like, "Listen,
Right. Well, but with what you're saying, if things are changing, who knows? What if one of those third world areas does become Arctic?
right?"
You know?
Well, it's not third world, but Inuit natives did.
Yeah.
They did. For thousands of years lived without electricity. Now they do. I'm not saying Inuits now are part of the third world, but they did. They did it.
well,
They
even
did.
if it's just thrown off schedule, like I don't think people realize sometimes talking about like farms, like if suddenly it gets warm for 2 weeks and then you have 2 days of really heavy frost and then it kicks back, like it's not like we had 2 days of frost. It's like you just like that killed the next 2 months worth of like we're gonna have to bounce back from that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel like a lot, right? You're like, it was chilly for a weekend. It was chilly for a week. I'm like, yeah, but it was April or May. Like
Yep.
that's
Right.
or September.
And it's also, I read a year ago where there's an imbalance of when like bees are when insects are coming out versus when flowers are actually that it's we're now officially out of balance with that by like several weeks. So there's issues with pollination of plants and
Yeah,
things.
and I mean we can have issues. I have a where we live, we have a Kwanzaa cherry blossom tree, and last year its blooms were they were very healthy, and we had that Arctic freeze, and it didn't bloom last year. And for the non-gardeners or the folks that don't know where your fruits come from, I mean, you lose your flowers, you're losing your fruit, right?
Yeah.
So those are things that we have to consider.
Yeah.
And the bees, and I'm always like, quit spraying all these pesticides. Not just our foods, but quit killing the bees. We need more pollinators.
We need bees and fruit bats.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, I'm with the bats, one thing I really want is them to do like some dark sky zones in Kentucky where they
Yeah.
just change the overhead lights where it's like, just cup it down.
That would
It
be-
doesn't have to go everywhere.
Right? No, that would be, yeah. No, when I really started, I used to be a huge user of agave because I actually liked the taste of agave. And then I learned that agave was like killing all of the fruit bats in the Southwest and Mexico and all these places. So now I'm back to local honey again, going back to the, but buy your supply locally is better for everybody.
Monoculture is bad.
Yeah.
It always is bad. It never works.
No.
It works up until you're like, oh, we ruined everything.
Yeah. No, I was watching one of those shows, one of those like food, one of those where like literally every episode was like, oh, you love avocados? You're a dick.
The avocado cartels
Like,
now.
avocado cartel. Oh, you like agave? Fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
you're ruining everything. And it got very sad for a minute. And then I got over it. And now I do everything I can to, I love the co-op.
And it's
I
hard to
agree.
be updated on it. There's so many things where you're like, but I bought it in the store and it had the label, like I did the thing.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things I noticed that when the pandemic started, when it first like hit, like when the world went to shit, I remember going into a store and watching generations younger than me, like trying to figure out what the hell do we do?
Mhm.
And it was then that I realized that we have a great majority of people that do not know where their food come from.
Oh, yeah. This whole idea of food literacy, right? Do you even know what you're eating?
Right.
Right.
Or are you just like, it's food, it's
Right.
fine.
Right.
It's been regulated, it's safe. At any quantity, at any time, for as much as I want.
But then you have the opposite. We're, not all about, but the privilege of being able to go somewhere like the co-op, and I am financially privileged in the fact that I can afford to buy these local meats, and they're for whatever reason slightly more expensive than like whatever the ground beef that's being, or the chicken, whatever that's coming from the Amazon. Somehow that's less expensive than the cattle farmers down the street, and we have food deserts. East Louisville is they've lost half their grocery stores.
Well, and I think that makes me think about a lot of times, how do we make farming cool? I mean, farming's hard work. We know that. But, and we know that it can be expensive too. But this takes me back to if farmers could grow small amounts of their own cannabis that they could sell direct to us, that would be like an additional, like an offset to their income to help them grow other crops or raise other animals. Because the thing is we talk about privilege, but what if we could expand a career into that? How do we make it fun again? How do we make it interesting? How do we teach people about where their food comes from, and if it's grown or if it's being raised locally on like fallowed land, like where there's not pesticides and there's not toxins. And if you just like, I like to challenge people to try to grow one thing. There's people in my life and they're like, I can't grow anything, it'll just die. And I'm like, try one thing, whether that's basil, a tomato, just start. And if you don't do well, try again, but stick with that one thing. And then if your neighbor does it, do a different thing. And then you start bartering that or selling that or donating that. We have to start back in our communities.
Yes.
And while that can be a privilege there, the co-op, I'll give them a shout out again, because they are a place that allow people to start those new journeys, and they have a place where they can actually get their stuff into the market. Which is really great. But I just think that we need to expand on that more in this country, rather than trying to industrialize our food and our cannabis. I mean,
Not to get back to the conspiracies, but like, yes, subsidized agriculture. Why is there an imbalance? And like, you're paying this for this, but you're paying that for that. It's like, well, you are paying for that other one. It's just coming out of your tax dollars, right? It's not coming on the front end.
Yes.
well, and you don't have as much control over. Well, you do at the end of the day at the retail level, but where those tax dollars are going as into how that food is then being raised and sold back to you. I mean, that's really what we're talking about. But
No,
just
there
to
are heavy
kind of-
contracts that certain supermarkets have to buy. Like, when you go down the cereal aisle, it's basically General Mills Emporium. Like, there's not really, like, if you start, it's like I just found out the other day those kettle chips that they sell in Kroger are made by Campbell's Soup.
Right.
And I felt so deceived. I was like, I don't know why, but I was like, it's all the same thing.
Well, because it's food monopoly. So Kettle Chips didn't start
Yeah. Yeah.
with Campbell's. It's these small home-based companies create a product. They start selling it locally. It expands to the point where then essentially General Mills and ABC Universal
Yeah.
come in and go, ABC Disney, whatever, NBC Universal. It's pretty much it's all, they come in and go, we own that now.
Yeah.
And it's Johnson and Johnson, and it's General Mills, and it's all one.
Well,
I'm
the
going to
barrier
play
to
that.
entry, too.
I want to play the SNL Schoolhouse Rock. Have you ever heard that? It aired one time on SNL, and then it was like NBC banned it. Now you can only find it on YouTube. They won't even show it on the Peacock SNL like channel thing that they've got. Yeah, it's my favorite thing.
It was
in the world.
interesting because you brought up the cereal aisle. And I think I'll throw this out there for listeners because I think, I have aha moments by either hearing someone's podcast or in a conversation, but, we have so many fortified foods. And I know that at one time there was a reason for that. And maybe some people still need that. But one of the things that I've been looking and reading about a little bit more is, there are genetic mutations, MTHFR. Go look that up if you don't know. If you have some sort of certain genetics, there are two types of mutations that will not allow you to break down things like folic acid. And so you can get your folate from certain greens and those sort of things, but you need quite a bit. And we don't think about not just our vitamins, but our breads, our cereals, all these things are fortified with folic acid. And if you cannot break those down, that is really more harm for you than good. And there are ways to find out if you have that mutation. And I think I read that over 65% of the population in America has this one of two, if not both, mutations. And no one, there's not a lot of people talking about that. So it was just interesting because you said the cereal aisle, and we're talking about all these things, and that made me think, here's the perfect time. Let's throw that out there. So for a listener who may not have heard about that, go use your Google. And while maybe Google don't bring you everything, look for scholarly articles about it.
Yes.
And there are companies out there that'll let you check for that. But
Go to Scientific America. I'm sure that there's
Yeah.
this is an article somewhere.
It makes
on
me
that
want to do
website.
that thing, the commercial we had when we were young. You can just see it, but I won't say it because it's probably like copyrighted. But
Talking about the more you know.
you said it. I did. But no, but yeah.
Do you know what those commercials were, by the way? Do you remember? Like,
Probably
you're talking
not
about the
now.
ones that had celebrities on them that would come on?
Yeah, when
Right. Those. So do you know what those were?
Well, I should, but maybe not at this moment.
So
It's late.
those PSAs, celebrities that would get into legal trouble rather than doing jail time would have to do PSAs for the government. And that's where those came from.
You know what? The more you know.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
By the way, just thought I'd share that.
So we've been talking about food, and I'll let you, because that's a question, like who's going to be sitting at his table?
I don't. So yeah. So if you're, usually we reserve this for chefs, and but I think we originally created this question for chefs, but now we just ask everybody. So if you were hosting a dinner party at your house, what 3 celebrities or historical figures would you want to invite?
It would probably be all writers. A lot of my dad's family are writers.
Fair.
And it's the table conversation is great. Is it like people that I have to hang out with, or is it like I have to get something out of this? Just spending time with these people, what I would like.
You're having dinner. It's a dinner party. It's you and 3 celebrities, and and your significant other if you want. Some friends that aren't celebrities. I don't know, but you're eating food, you're having a meal, and you're having a conversation.
Probably like Neil Gaiman. He seems like he would be a really cool person to interact with. Like the vibe is good. Ursula K. Le Guin.
Nice.
I love all of her talks and I love all of her books. Like there's so much stuff. Like I read her books constantly and I'm like, wow, this hit the same as it did when I was 12. I won't say the same. It hit as strong, just in different ways. God, it would probably be another writer. Maybe like Patrick Rothfuss or like another fiction writer that I'm reading right now.
Fair.
See, everything is going to end up being,
No.
it's always writers. I'm like,
But I
maybe
love-
like Vincent Price.
So I dig that. No, Terry Pratchett's on my
Yeah.
list. I absolutely Terry Pratchett has it's so admittedly I'm not a very voracious reader anymore. I was as a child. I'm one of those like, not prodigy, what's the word? Accelerated kids that then got fucked with and now I like don't read anymore. I didn't live up to my potential. Now I host a podcast about weed.
That's where I'm at.
Right? But I love watching the move. So with Neil Gaiman, I think Stardust is one of the most underrated movies of all time. And if you haven't watched it, go watch it because it's fucking fantastic. And with Terry Pratchett, Hogfather is the best Christmas. It's not really a movie because it's a 3-episode series, but it's the greatest quote unquote Christmas story I think that was ever written. And the final speech that Death gives about show me an atom of mercy, a molecule of love is one of the greatest things ever written, period. So I feel you on the writers.
Oh, yeah. No, Neil Gaiman is do you Good Omens at all?
I did watch some of Good Omens. I have to go back and rewatch. I think I was like at a place in life where I was, it was the beginning of the pandemic and I was just getting high every day and putting on Good Omens and not paying attention. And I found myself just rewinding episodes. Oh, because I was like, I was out of my mind. I was like, I know this is good, but I have no idea what just happened.
I got hooked on it.
Yeah.
I love David Tennant. He was my doctor that I got introduced through. So I'm like, oh, now I have to watch this other thing.
I love David as an actor. David Tennant is one of the best. And it's David Tennant and
Sheen.
yes,
Yeah.
who is just brilliant. Just two of the most brilliant actors. Period of my generation, our generation. Yeah. So I don't know. It's on my list of like I got to go back to that for sure.
One of the other questions, and we ask this to everyone, is what is some of the best advice you've ever been given? Whether that's a quote or
Pay attention. That was the single best piece of advice I got, and like pretty much stays. And that was it. Pay attention. But I'm like, yeah, that surfaced pretty well. Like,
Nice. I like it. Pay attention.
well, I tell you what, I don't know.
I'm watching. Oh, so that goes along with I'm watching The Traitors right now, which I usually don't watch reality TV, but sometimes you find those really good. So if you don't know about The Traitors, basically they take a group of celebrities from other reality shows, so like Survivor and The Challenge, and they've put them in a giant castle in Scotland. With what's his name? He's so brilliant an actor. Anyway, and he's this brilliant Scottish actor, is the host of the whole show, and he wears fabulous outfits. But 2 to 3 of the celebrities are traitors, and they're killing off the rest of them. So it's like a big game of Clue, essentially. It's fucking fabulous. But the best piece of advice, the winner of season 1, when they asked her what's the best piece of advice you could give for season 2, she said, "Shut your mouth and open your ears. Talk less, listen more. Pay attention."
Well, I know that our folks are like,
I know. Speaking of talking
know.
less,
But before we leave, we want people to know where they can find your podcast, and maybe if you want to share a little bit about your podcast, we want people to follow you too. We want people to listen to what the folks that you're talking to, and the things. I know you spend some time in Frankfurt and working on how we're moving forward here. So
beating that drum.
yeah.
They can find me on bluegrasscannabis.com. That has all the social links. That has all the episodes. It has all the Spotify, iTunes. They can get to everywhere else from there. Facebook's, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. It's everywhere, either at Bluegrass Podcast, at Bluegrass Cannabis. And yeah, it's advocates, it's farmers, it's just people in the space that I've interacted with. And I love talking to a couple people, Nick T from Essential Extracts. My friend Alex, who does some private chef events, they're coming on this spring. And yeah, it's easy because I can just say go to the website and everything's right on there.
I love it.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you coming and being on the show with us, and I hope folks, like and follow us, but go like and follow Elijah as well, and listen to some of his guests and what they have to offer as well. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Elijah, thank you so much for coming on and joining us in this conversation.
Thank you for having me on, especially we hit that right time, right between the snows.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
We appreciate you. And that's the end. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please like, subscribe, follow us. Come to Cannalachia.com on Facebook, Instagram, and we're trying to deal with TikTok.
Yeah, and tell all your friends about it. Word of mouth works well, too.
My Mickey, my moon to me, the just go with me, go with me. I want to pay while I'm on the play. If you get that, I better want to pay. Better read that way, the birthday. Better 55 grand for the rain. If you want my money, the bank goes again. If you have with me, if you want to trade, everything got power to better. We can let it, come on, get a legend.